This is the story of a journey that began like any other and ended as one of the darkest days in aviation history. Japan Airlines Flight 123, a proud Boeing 747, stood tall on a runway at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. Inside, more than 500 passengers and crew members settled into their seats. They expected nothing more than a short flight to Osaka, a trip that would take only about 1 hour. Families chatted. Businessmen reviewed their notes. Children leaned against windows, watching the glowing sunset as engines prepared to roar. But what none of them knew was that hidden deep within the airplane structure was a weakness, a wound waiting to open. At 24,000 feet, the tail would rip away. The controls would die. The cabin would lose air. And for 45 long minutes, the crew would fight against a sky that had turned into an enemy. It was the 12th of August, 1985. The Obon holiday had filled airports with life. For the Japanese people, Obon is a time of homecoming, when millions return to honor ancestors and gather with family. The terminal buzzed with joy and movement. Travelers hurried toward gates, carrying gifts, snacks, and suitcases stuffed with clothes. At Gate 18, passengers filed into the wide cabin of Flight 123. The Boeing stretched long and massive, its rows of seats filled nearly to capacity. For many, this flight meant reunion. Some were going home to see parents. Others were students returning from Tokyo. For one child, it was their first airplane ride. For an elderly couple, it was perhaps their last holiday trip together. They smiled, unaware that history was about to write their names in a tragedy. In the cockpit sat three men, seasoned and strong. Captain Masami Takahama, at 49 years of age, carried the weight of more than 12,000 hours of flight. He was calm, steady, and deeply respected among pilots. Beside him was First Officer Yutaka Sasaki, just shy of 40, ambitious and sharp, gathering experience to one day wear the captain's stripes. Behind them, Flight Engineer Hiroshi Fukuda kept watch over the heartbeat of the aircraft, its hydraulics, engines, and electrical systems. These three men formed a team built on trust and discipline. To the passengers, they were unseen guardians. And to themselves, this was meant to be another routine journey through the evening sky. But the hidden scar in the airplane's body would soon test them beyond anything training could prepare for. Shortly after 6 in the evening, the engines thundered. The mighty Boeing rolled down the runway, lifting gracefully into the golden light of dusk. The sky stretched wide and calm, a few thunderclouds drifting far to the west. For 12 minutes, the climb was smooth. Passengers settled in. Some pulled out books, some leaned back to nap, some listened to the faint hum of the four engines. Then it happened. A sudden, deafening boom shook the cabin. The floor trembled violently. At the rear of the aircraft, a massive rupture split open, as if the metal itself had torn apart. The pressure inside burst outward with explosive force. Oxygen rushed out. Items flew across the cabin. Bags, papers, even people were pulled toward the opening. Screams filled the air. In a matter of seconds, what had been a peaceful flight turned into a nightmare no one could escape. In the cockpit, the noise was overwhelming. The controls vibrated strangely. Warning lights glared red. The crew searched for answers. Could it be a landing gear problem? Was it an engine failure? But the truth was far more deadly. The vertical stabilizer, the towering fin on the tail, was gone. With it went the rudder, the key to steering an aircraft left or right. And with the rupture of the rear pressure bulkhead, every hydraulic line had been severed. Without hydraulics, the airplane had lost its muscles. The yokes and pedals in front of the pilots, usually so responsive, now felt like empty levers. Unknown to the men in the cockpit, they were flying a crippled giant that no longer had the ability to obey down on the ground. People noticed something strange. The airplane, so large and powerful, was swaying in the sky like a wounded bird. Some pointed, others raised cameras and captured images showing the tail missing entirely. In the cockpit, alarms screamed without pause. The pilots declared an emergency, broadcasting their distress. Their voices were tense, but still professional. The transponder flashed the universal distress code. Controllers on the ground listened in shock as the captain asked to return to Tokyo. Yet when the first officer tried to turn, the airplane refused to respond. The controls were dead. The hydraulics, its veins of life, had drained away. Ailerons, elevators, flaps, every system pilots rely on had gone silent. The Boeing 747 was a drifting giant, alive only because its engines still thundered beneath its wings. Then came the realization. The airplane could not be controlled in the way every pilot is trained. Their only hope was to use the raw power of the engines. By pushing the throttles forward on one side, they could force the aircraft to twist slightly. By reducing power on both, they could force it to sink. By carefully balancing thrust, they might be able to climb or descend. It was an impossible task, like trying to steer a ship by throwing buckets of water overboard. Yet, in the face of hopelessness, the crew did not surrender. They fought. Every ounce of training, every reflex, every instinct was poured into those throttles. They were no longer flying with their hands. They were flying with raw willpower. Inside the passenger cabin, terror deepened. The sudden decompression had stolen oxygen from the air. Masks dropped, swinging wildly from the ceiling. Parents struggled to fix them onto their children's faces. Some passengers, too confused or too slow, began to feel the creeping fog of hypoxia. Their vision blurred. Their bodies felt heavy. Minds grew slow. Some collapsed in their seats. In the cockpit, the captain made a desperate choice. He lowered the landing gear. Without hydraulics, it should have been impossible. But gravity pulled it down, clunking into place. The gears slowed the airplane, forcing it to descend from 24,000 to around 13,500 feet. At this lower altitude, the thin air thickened enough to breathe. A small victory, but not salvation. The mountain ranges of Japan loomed ahead, silent and merciless. The crew aimed for Tokyo, clinging to the hope of reaching a runway. But guiding the crippled Boeing with only engines was a brutal fight. Every adjustment threw the plane into violent swings, rolling left and right, the wings slicing through the air like a wounded bird struggling against the wind. The ground below rose higher. Mountains stood like dark giants in the evening light. Inside the cockpit, alarms shrieked, warning of terrain. The captain barked commands. The first officer wrestled the throttles. The flight engineer shouted readings. Their voices grew louder, more desperate, but never gave into panic. At 6:48, the captain cried for a turn. Mountains were dead ahead. The engines roared in defiance, but the broken aircraft could not respond with the precision needed. It drifted, heavy and doomed, toward the rising earth. After 45 minutes of struggle that defied all odds, the fight ended. Flight 123 slammed into the mountainside. The sound of tearing metal echoed through the valleys. Fire consumed the wreckage. Out of more than 500 lives, only 4 survived the inferno. The investigation that followed uncovered a haunting truth. 7 years earlier, this very aircraft had suffered a tail strike during landing. Boeing engineers had repaired it, but the repair had been done incorrectly. The weakened joint could withstand only a limited number of pressurization cycles. By August of 1985, that limit had been passed. The disaster was inevitable. This tragedy remains the deadliest involving a single aircraft. But within that tragedy lies a story of defiance. For nearly an hour, the crew fought with everything they had, fought with courage, fought with determination, fought with humanity itself. And though they could not win, their battle remains one of the most extraordinary acts of skill and bravery ever seen in the skies. And so, this tragic story of the Japanese plane crash reminds us of one thing: life is fragile, and every moment we have is precious. The courage of the passengers, the struggle of the pilots, and the heartbreak of the families left behind will never be forgotten. Even decades later, the lessons from this disaster continue to shape aviation safety and remind the world of the importance of care and responsibility in the skies. If you found this story powerful, make sure to like this video and share it so others can also learn from history. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more